don't have a witty story to tell tonight.
I don't know money back.
Huh?
I want my money back. Sorry, Chris will fill the gap.
Yeah.
$100.
Been dwelling on Ruth chapter 2 this week. So that's where we're talking about the story of Ruth. How it is a story of redemption. How worthless people, and by worthless people, I don't mean people that have no value whatsoever, but people who society deems worthless. How do they get redeemed? How do they get value? Well, I know last week we talked about us doing our part, and those of us worthless people giving each other value. And that's true. Have you ever met somebody or known somebody or a group of people that the society just deemed worthless? Now that I'm thinking about it, I was part of that in high school. In high school, believe it or not, I wasn't the coolest guy on high school campus. I know that's a shocker to some of you. Like, hair, not cool? What? How can you not be cool and have a name Hair? You know, everybody with a nickname is cool, right? I was the geek. In middle school, I was the guy everybody decided to beat up. I never could figure out why. Probably because I left. And I still kind of am the butt of a lot of jokes and stickings on from some folks. Some of them were in this room. Some of them are not. But when I went to high school, I had this low image of myself. I did not fit in. I did not fit in with the jocks because I was non-athletic. Not that I wasn't an athlete, I was non-athletic. There's a difference. I didn't really fit in with the preps because, I don't know, they had more money than I did, and it showed. I didn't really fit in with, the nerds, the super hyper intelligent people, because I was average intelligence. I was just an average guy who just didn't fit in anywhere until I came to Christ. And when I came to Christ, I realized there were other people like me. We all didn't really fit in anywhere. We just kind of fit in with each other. And our group gave us value. Gave each other value because we were worth something to somebody else. I think the coolness factor of our group increased my junior year because my friend Roy, who was a senior, who was a baseball player, who was in the jock crowd, in the cool crowd, knew all the right people, knew all the right things, and could meld with anybody. He was one of those guys that you wanted to know on campus. Well, Jesus wanted to know him too, and he came to Christ. And God grabbed hold of Roy, and Roy grabbed, more appropriately to say, Roy grabbed hold of God, and he wouldn't let go. And he couldn't. He said he no longer fit in with the jocks anymore because that wasn't where it needed to be, because they did things that God wouldn't approve of. Things that God says, that's not good. You don't do that. Right? You know what I'm saying? And he found this group of geeks, nerds, misfits, toys, guys who just didn't fit in anywhere. He found us. The ambassador. We were at a group called Ambassadors for Christ, AFC. And we had our first cool guy. We were like, yes, we will worship you. You will lead us.
How does that work?
It's like Robin Hood coming into town of merry men, and all of a sudden he's like the coolest guy. So we're like, you do whatever, man. Whatever you say, we will listen. And it's all right. So, I don't know, I tell that story to illustrate the fact that, I don't know, when a worthless person gives another worthless person value, it's good, it's a good thing. But to increase the value, somebody society deems more valuable gives these people value. And life, it just kind of works. The higher you are, it's a little, you bring the lower people up to you. Bear with me, remember, I'm not saying that God deems one person more valuable than another. Don't hear that. Don't hear that. I'm saying society deems some people more valuable than others. And if you have a higher place in society, it is your job to bring people up and to value the lower ones. God says that time and time again in His Word. God says that you've got to look out for the widows, the orphans, the fatherless. You've got to look out for those people. Let me jump back before we get into Ruth chapter 2. Give you some background verses here. You can write them down if you want to. You can read them with me. We're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 23 real fast. It's really sad when I give you
Deuteronomy chapter 3.
23. Really sad when I give you the punchline of my sermon at the beginning, and now I got to give you the stuff that leads up to it. So 23, chapter 3, chapter 23, verse 3, gives you a sense of where Moabites.
Not starting with verse 1.
No, I'm just jumping. Well, no. Read verse 1, that'll give you that. These are in a list of people who are excluded from the assembly. That means people who can't come into the synagogue. Verse 1 is funny. Verse 2, so go ahead and read that one to yourselves and chuckle now. It's okay. Verse 3 says this: no Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and with water when you came out of Egypt, because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Okay, so Ruth was what? She was a Moabite. All right, God says you can't have Moabites in your assembly. Why? You guys remember the story of Balaam? It's a funny story. God called him to curse the Israelites, and he's riding on his donkey, and the donkey sees an angel, wouldn't go, turns around, and the guy starts beating the donkey and trying to go. The donkey moves again. Finally, his donkey talks to him and tells him, "This is not. I'm doing this because I don't want to die." That's the Hair Kelly abridged version of that story. So yeah, God, so the Moabites were the ones that hired Balaam to curse them. Not a good thing. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 19. Should be just one page over. And this sets the scene for the rest of the story. This sets the scene for chapter 2 and the story behind how Ruth and Boaz met. Verse 19 says this: when you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourners, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterwards. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this. They were commanded to take care of the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow. Ruth kind of fit all three of those at the moment. She had no father that we know of in Scripture. Or the father that she did have died. And the father, Elimelech, died. She was a widow. Her husband, whatever, one of those, Malon or Chilion, I don't remember which one. I don't think it said which one was her husband. He died. Sudden male death syndrome. It's a problem back in Egypt, and Moab apparently. And then she was a sojourner. She was not a native to Israel. So the fatherless, widowed sojourner living with another widow in Israel. Background. Now let's go into verse chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of the grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was in the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And he's pointing at Ruth, apparently. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is a young Moabite woman who came back, Naomi, from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among your sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Pause right there for a moment. There are two ways you can read this story, depending on how your translation words it. It brings that out there. Depending on how your translation words it is how you read it. Because I've read two different takes of this. One is that Ruth was a very smart and conniving young woman. She knew, or she was a smart and intelligent woman, I guarantee you this. I'll give you that. Because she knew that she could go and glean in the fields. That she could go, and gleaning is picking up the stuff that the people forget. Because God commanded that, right? God says, do not, and Leviticus, it also adds, do not even harvest at the edge of your field all the way to the edges. Leave the edges of your field so that the sojourner, the orphan, and the widow can come and reap that. That's not yours. That's for them. If you drop something on the ground, leave it. If you miss a stalk, leave it. Let somebody else come back behind it. And women, there was a lot of women doing this. A lot of people doing this gleaning. And apparently, we left Naomi in a bitter state. And Naomi is one of those in a depressed, bitter situation. And her only joy is the fact that Ruth is with her. And she's like, fine, go. Do that. That's fine. Do that. And the one way you can read it is that Ruth picked Boaz's field out of all these other fields because she knew who Boaz was. And that she knew the relations. And maybe even Naomi pushed her into that field. That's one way you can read it. Another reading of it says she didn't know that she was in Boaz's field. That's a good reading. Good way to look at it. Because maybe the way the fields were set up, it was hard to tell whose field was whose and how they set up and how they got to where they were going to be. And how did she know Boaz was even going to pay any attention to her? She was just going out there to see if somebody could find favor for her. And she went out into this field, and it happened to be the field of Boaz, who was a kinsman to Elimelech, who was her husband's father.